630. You're on the air. Is this Mark?
Yeah. Hey, Jeanie.
Hey.
It's great to hear your voice again.
Thank you. It's good to hear from you. And we have had so many comments of people that have really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you very much for being part of our show this week and discussing the Beatitudes with us.
It's been just such a pleasure. I want more and more people to be aware of the gifts that they bring.
Absolutely. Welcome, Michael. Mark is already with us.
Thank you, dear heart, and thank you, Mark. Glad that you're here.
Glad to be here.
I'd like to open the conversation with, do you have any other thoughts to add from yesterday? We kind of ran into a little bit of a time crunch, but...
we could talk for probably a whole episode on each Beatitude individually. So we could always expand on it. Sure. But I felt pretty complete with Beatitude 6, and I know, we're going to move on to Beatitude 7 today. But how about you? Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think we've got a picture of it. It gives everybody a good taste, and if they want to spend time with that poster, of course they can order one, but they don't need to do that. You can just go to the link in the notes from the last couple of days, and it'll take you right to our website with a copy of the poster. You can go to whyagain.org, and in the upper left-hand corner, click the Start Here button, and just look down the list, and you'll come to where it says Other Worksheets, and the poster is there, so you can print it off and spend time with it. If you want to take it to the next level, you might want to order the book, Enlightenment, which is what we've published so far from the Cavor's manuscript, and that has the first century dictionary, and there's a powerful experience in going into the dictionary and sorting through all the shades of meaning and possibility. As I said, for me personally, when I worked on this poster way back almost 40 years ago, I sat down and wrote it out longhand, and that was where the big aha came of, this is not just a nice philosophy, which is what I had always been taught, but this really is a set of instructions. This is how to have a sound human mind and live, as Yeshua said 2,000 years ago. The reason he was here was to bring life, not dogmas and doctrines and all that sort of stuff, not churchianity, but really to take people into human life. And interesting, one of the things we created out of the Aramaic was a course called Laws of Living. Unfortunately, we don't have that one yet as a standalone self-study intensive, but when you realize that word law in Aramaic is not the rule of a superior as the Greek philosophies would have you believe, but the word law in Aramaic is really just, here's the recipe for how to create something, for how something works. And so the Beatitudes are how to make life work as a human being, and in particular, the protocol for how to cause your mind to work as a human mind, which is not, sadly, what the Western world has much of a clue about. So it's pretty exciting stuff to me to realize there's such a clear formula as the Beatitudes gives, a clear set of instructions, and you understand them for really, truly living in a human mind. So the final Beatitude we're going to talk about today is the one that the Greeks say, blessed are the peacemakers, they shall be called children of God. And there's a really big piece that the Greek translation misses in this particular Beatitude, and that is that in the Aramaic words there is a pointer to part of the protocol, and that is that there's a component of service here. It's kind of like I've come to understand is, here's my rent for being on earth, for having a human life and being on earth, and that is that there's service to humanity required in this Beatitude in order to fulfill, really bring into expression our full humanness. So in the Aramaic, Yuhu, and the word in Aramaic is abde. Through service, work effectively to produce peace and understanding under and in accord with the Creator's will. And if we do that work, if we do put energy into service in order to serve humanity, then what it says is that you will be called, you'll step into a category where you function as the offspring of the Creator, as a child of the Creator, a reflection of the Creator's energy. And this completes the protocol aspect of the Beatitudes for bringing about a true human life. How has that one struck you?
So this is one of my favorites. It's one of those that really had a deep, moving meaning for me, and it's very much aligned with what you're saying. But I'm going to share a lived experience of just kind of how it showed up for me. Because I was very much a rule follower. Excuse me. A rule follower as a kid. You know, if my mom and dad said something or a teacher said something, I wasn't the rebel. I was like, okay, I just want to be, accepted and, be thought of well and behave and all those things that were important in our structure.
Right.
And the gap for me was the relationship wasn't always there with why. The relationship wasn't always there with, you're saying that I'm, quote unquote, supposed to do it this way, but I didn't either take the time or what have you. I just wanted to comply. And so one of the things that happened when I had my psychotic break and then started to get into the healing process is this struck me incredibly when I started to get to a place where these inspired thoughts would come through to write, or an inspired thought would come through. For example, obviously you're familiar with the program that we devised based on the foundation of your tools called Optimal Being, and there was just this desire for that. And the Beatitudes, that's another way that, and I'll share how I got there, but it's another way that Beatitude 7 showed up, is this thrust of insight came that, this is important to me in my developing my understanding, because it really helped me, look at all the different aspects, but then to share it with others, through the Beatitudes practice, which is just what we called it. And what I love about this, if we look at peacemakers, and I'm going to go to JM just for a second, just to bring his context in, because the way he had described it is ripening in a new wholeness. And there is such a naturalness to that. Like if we think of a fruit on a tree, the unripened fruit that becomes ripened. And so as we do these early Beatitudes, this idea of peacemakers, there's a refinement that's happening in us. And we get to this place where, as it says, we'll be called the children of God. And I know one of the things that you've done a really nice job of is contrasting the Aramaic and the Greek. But on that last part of will be called the children of God, it ties together here the Greek word, which I won't be able to pronounce because I've never spoken a word in Greek, but I'll do my best. It's like huio theo is the way it looks, and it shows up 41 times in the New Testament, and it's synonymous with Christ Messiah, or one who has a unique relationship with God, or inseparable with God, one with God. And the one that I liked the best, that matched with my lived experiences, anyone sharing the same nature as God. And so that idea of being a child of God, it's like, well, blessed are those who do this work, who do all this work and go through Beatitudes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's not a one-time thing. Obviously, it's it's an ongoing evolutionary process. But as we ripen into this new wholeness, as we come into this relationship, we become kind of these channels, as J.M. says, for new creations that serve the same restoration in others, which I'm not sure how he got there because I don't know his whole framework, but he also studied the Aramaic, and it was like that really resonated for me, that serve the restoration in others. And I'd say it this way, it's like there's this joy that comes like, oh, I'm experiencing this overflowing abundance of relationship with God, with these life forces of God, these active, amazing forces that are alive in me, right? And how do I now bring it out in the world and help others find it too? So that was the best I could articulate it right now as to like how it showed up for me, just how my experience was with it.
Yeah, stepping into the thing of service. And a thought I'd like to offer, Mark, because I've heard you claim this before, and I heard you just claim it again, and I'm going to make a suggestion that perhaps it'd be the last time in your eternal life that you do claim this. And you talked about a psychotic break. I don't think you had a psychotic break at all. I think you broke with I don't think you broke with my offering would be you broke with insanity, the ego mind, the Mr. Magoo mind, and you started to bring in the true state of being, which is what these Beatitudes are about. And the world says, uh-oh, that's crazy. How dare you function as a human being? You're supposed to, that story I shared the other day about, the crabs in the bucket. When you put one crab in a bucket, it crawls out. If you put two crabs in a bucket, when one tries to crawl out, the other one grabs it and pulls it back in again. You don't need a lid on a crab bucket. If you got 20 crabs in the bucket and one tries to crawl out, another one will pull it in, another one will pull it in, will pull it in. And I'd offer that diagnosis, and if we break down the word diagnosis, a dyad is two, an agnostic is somebody who doesn't know, two who don't know. And oftentimes these diagnoses are simply from the state of the non-being mind, and why aren't you being normal with all these other minds that work in the world of rage and fear and guilt and grief and pain and drama and trauma? Come on, get back here with us, because that's how we feel validated. And so I would say you had an opening in your ego structure, something that the world does its best to lock us into. You had an opening in that where truly human life started to show up. That's what, for instance, when you talked about, you'd go into these yoga postures, your structure was saying, okay, here's what you do to open up your antenna so that you receive what you as a true human being are designed to receive. And my offering is that's not a break. That's an opening.
Well, and you're right on, and I received that, and I would love to find a way of expressing that would help others see what you're saying, with a kind of a clean way of communicating it. But that helped a lot. Thank you. I might come back and listen to that.
No.
And for me personally, by the way, just for people listening, I had kind of, and I don't think this is necessarily ripe yet, right? I think what you said is much more ripe. I had come to, the world talks about these situations in a way that they talk about these situations. And so in the medical model, they would look at the things I went through and say, yeah, it's a psychotic break. In my life experience, it's like, it's wonderful. I'm so glad I had that quote unquote psychotic break. I mean, that was
the healing
breakthrough that was needed for me to fully come online and have a life. My before and after pictures, if there was a photo
exactly
that could illustrate it, which it can, because the surface looks pretty similar, but if it could reveal the core of a human being, I think what you'd see is the before picture would be someone who was on his deathbed, and the after picture is someone who has risen into new life, and it's such a contrast.
And risen is a good word.
I like it too.
That's the real resurrection. You know, if you realize that people who function out of a mind with hostility or fear active, Yeshua referred to those people. There was one guy who lived in that world and said, "Man, I want to follow you," and he said, "But I have to go bury my parents first." And it was in that culture, it was a man's job to stay with his parents till they died and literally bury them. And Yeshua was like, well, wait a minute. If you're going to follow me, you're going to step into life. Let the dead bury the dead. Let the blind lead the blind. That's not where you're going to go if you're going to follow me. Now, you are going to get to take up your cross. This process of healing is not a Dr. Feel-Good thing. It means we're going to go through the quote-unquote craziness of the non-being mind and have to work through it, and it is a work. I was on the phone this morning. We have a young lady in England. Actually, it was kind of interesting because she shared that, or she had written to us and said, I want to start a book study on your book. It's like, great. So my first question to her when we talked said, yeah, well, of course, we'll support you with that. My first question was, how did you get a hold of the work? How did you find out about it? She said, well, I don't really know. Somehow your book showed up, ordered from Amazon. I didn't order it, or at least I don't remember ordering it. I don't know why I got it, but I started doing these worksheets, and it is profoundly life-changing. And since I had my quote-unquote, what the world might call a health break or a psychotic break, about 5 years ago, this young woman, she looks like she's maybe 30 or so, she had a brain bleed, and as a result went blind and clinically died. And she called it a near-death experience. And, you know, if you're already dead, you can't have a near-death experience. If somebody is dead to the truth of who they are as love, as created essence being called love, then they're already dead. That's the first death. And if clinical death occurs, you know, the self that isn't the non-being self, the self based in hostility or fear, the one that Yeshua said, in order for you to live, you've got to die. That self that needs to die is a self based in hostility and fear. When clinical death occurs, because that's a product of Adam, Adamos, the red clay, when clinical death occurs, that self is collapsed. It's gone. And that's exactly what the Aramaic forgiveness process does, is it collapses that non-being self each time one engages in forgiveness. And when that non-being self is in a non-active state, one gets a chance to experience who they are. And this woman spoke about how after she had this brain bleed and she, quote-unquote, died clinically, all of a sudden she's like, I started to see things, I started to understand things that didn't make any sense. And as a result of that, she changed her career and started to work with supporting people in having a near-life experience. And somehow or other, she said, you know, the book just showed up from Amazon without her ordering it. At least she didn't remember ordering it. And she started reading and started doing worksheets, and she's just, you know, moving her life forward. And she said, I'm going to bring this into my book study club. And she'd started the club after she had this near-life experience where she clinically died, after she had this brain bleed, this stroke that led to a brain bleed. She had a break with the non-being self. And everybody that has this near-life experience comes back, and they've had a chance to experience themselves as who they are without reference to the carbon-based memory, fictitious self. And some people I've run into kind of have some, you know, sort of partial memory of that, but they never did anything with it. But most people, their lives change dramatically because even though they don't know it's what they realize that's not who I am. And they've struggled and worked to try to bring into expression in their lives who they really are. And that's the work of Yeshua. Again, Yeshua's stated purpose was, I come to bring you life more abundantly, and to bring forward the full expression of human life. That pre-brainwashed self-generational pattern of hostility and fear has to be defeated, has to be taken apart. And most of the world functions in that self. And so anyone who's crawling out of the bucket with the diagnosis gets pulled back in. And so I just support you in, never referring to the diagnosis again as something you own or belongs to you or really has anything to do with you. It's called awakening. It's classic.
Yeah. I think you helped me see that one of the reasons I use it is for inclusion, because if I were to say to certain audiences that I had this awakening, I thought, could be incorrect, that I might lose people who would kind of say, okay, well, this is going into, it could be for some people like, okay, this is going right where I want it to go. And for others, it could be, okay, this is going into, kind of woo-wooville. And so I learned over the years, which I'm willing to unlearn, to use that kind of to include people in and then open up and dismantle it further in the once they're in the door, if you will.
Right.
But
and if you're talking to somebody who had that kind of diagnosis, still use it as, I could see where you might still use it as a tool for others who've been given that same, to who don't know, diagnostic name. It might be a way to talk to them and coach them out of that into the truth of what happened to them. And the world doesn't know how to handle that. I can remember working with a woman this goes back probably 30 years ago, and she was actually referred to me by a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, she had come to him for a second opinion. She'd been under the care of a separate psychiatrist, and he was getting ready to put her into long-term asylum because she was clinically crazy. And in order to do that, they had to have a second opinion to force her into that. And so the psychiatrist is someone who knew of my work and referred her to me. And when we uncovered her memory of her, the image in her mind of being a child, and I don't remember exactly what age. If I remember correctly, it was maybe 5 or 6. And standing with her father in the front of an asylum, where her father was pointing out to her mother in a window way off in the distance, who had just been put into an asylum that she never came out of. When she uncovered that memory and the pain of the loss of her mother being taken from her that way, she went from, the reason she was going to be incarcerated just like her mother was because she'd become non-functional in her relationship with her husband and her family. She had no relationship left with her kids. Her husband had left. They were, divorcing, and, she was, quote unquote, crazy. When we went back through still point breathing to that moment where she had this just deep, horrific pain of losing her mother, and remembering just seeing, the little picture of her up in that window up there where Dad said, well, Mom's gone now. Within about 3 weeks, the other thing was that she had lost her job and couldn't hold the job down. Within about 3 weeks, she was back to work. She was back in full-blown happy relationship with her husband. and back in relationship with the kids who were so estranged that, like, we need to put mom away. When we uncover the things that lock us into this non-being space of hostility and fear and are able to embrace them and process through them, then the thought disorders that take us out of the world's way of doing things oftentimes are the vehicle into living as the truth of who we are.
Yeah, yeah.
And it can take 1,000 different forms. It's as variable as there are people.
And that's the key for people who are listening too, who are doing this. And some of you I know have been doing it for a long time, probably longer than I have, but essentially it does show up how it needs to show up for us. I'd love to, if it's okay, before we go to Beatitude 8, or you might have more on Beatitude 7, of course, but before we move forward, I was inspired earlier this year to write about, the whole how mental health, can show up, and my first fiction novel I put out, just kind of mostly the friends and acquaintances, called Prisoner of War, and I just today put it up on Amazon, and so it's resetting the price, but today it's 99 cents, and tomorrow and for the next 5 days, I would have made it today, except for the rules on Amazon. For the next 5 days, it'll be free on Kindle. So if anyone is interested and would like to read it, it's a really interesting story that takes place in the future, in the year 2032, but it revolves around kind of mass formation, which is also known as mass psychosis, and a couple of different avenues of how it's approached in the book, one via technology and integration into the body, and another via this work, essentially, but through this main character, Marcus, who kind of navigates his own, what the world would call insanity, but his own awakening process. And it's really quite fun. It was amazing to put this out. So just for anyone who's interested, and is live on here, if you go there tomorrow to Amazon, and it's by a pseudonym author, John Aconda. I just use that for this fiction work, Aconda. So Prisoner of War by John Aconda is out today. So thanks for letting me share that. I meant to, and I apologize, I meant to actually email you,
it's cool,
ahead of time to ask permission, so I hope that wasn't...
no, that's okay. No, that's perfect. That's
free
perfect.
gift for everybody.
All right. Well, we'll download it and give it a listen. Prisoner of War. I'm just looking as we speak. Cool.
Yeah, and and the pricing up there, it'll be adjusted in a few minutes. I think it's still $4 or something. It'll be down to $99. Again, tomorrow it'll be free.
Cool. Well, you hadn't told me about that. Well, let's see. There's a book by that name by Michael P. Spradlin, but that's not the book you're talking about.
No, you probably, because it just went out, you probably have to type in the author, John Aconda, to locate it. And of course, Michael, if you'd like, once I get some print copies, I'll ship you a copy.
Cool.
I found that the subtitle of it said it was possible to heal from a mental illness.
Yep. And it's still kind of loading. The image isn't there on the Kindle one, but if you click on the paperback, it'll show you the cover of the book and description.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fun to get that out there. And as we get to the Beatitudes, I'll share some of the things I learned, from the Beatitudes in putting this together. As we go further on,
right, and
8, 9.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if we look at that, the poster that we did, I only went to the 8th Beatitude because the 7th Beatitude, because it really is the protocol, the instruction set for producing a mind that, rather than functioning from carbon-based memory, what most people call a mind, produces what was in Aramaic, they speak of two minds. There's the non-being mind, the mind of Adam, almost the red clay, and then there's what was called the mind of Christ. And the word Christ is usually thought of in this Greek philosophical culture as a religious word, but the word Christ really, it isn't a name, first of all. It's the title of an office. So, if let's say Mark ran for the mayor of Naperville, we would call him Mayor Mark, but mayor wouldn't be his name, it would be the office that he holds. Well, Christ is the name of an office in Aramaic, and actually the word more literally would mean the buttered one. They anointed people who'd awakened to the truth of who they were with oils, butter. And so that word Christ represents living as a human being. Paul talks about the mind of Christ in you. That isn't Yeshua. There was no man, Yeshua Christ, Jesus Christ. There was Yeshua who lived in the mind of Christ in him, encouraging others. It's interesting, the church tried to create this exclusivity. He's the only begotten Son, the Greeks tell us. Well, if you go to that passage in Aramaic, it doesn't say what the Greek translated as the only begotten. It says the first begotten. Now, somebody woke up to there and said, hey, guys, here's how you do it. The things I do, you can do. And when you do that, it'll be greater because you'll be living out of literally your birthright, and that is the mind of loving you, the mind of Christ. And so this 8th Beatitude really is saying that, people are going to look at you a little strange. So Greeks translate that as you're going to be persecuted for righteousness' sake. If you're living truly as a human being, the crabs are going to try to pull you back in the bucket. And so when it speaks of the kingdom of heaven, so if you're living out of the community of love, the world based in hostility affairs isn't probably going to like you very much. And so this idea of being persecuted for it, and I think, if back at day one, when you had this opening for that mind to start to operate in you, which the world really didn't recognize, if you had support from for that state way back when it happened, rather than having to wait until we met, you'd be, a whole lot further along the road. So, wish we'd connected earlier, but, obviously it was the right timing.
Yes. So, can I add to that?
Please, absolutely.
One of the interesting things about Beatitude 8 and 9, so 8 and 9 kind of deal with this idea of, the persecuted, and then 9 goes into the, a little bit of additional thing. And the way that I've come to understand it so far in my practice is that there's this, after 7, right? So 7, and I'll back up a little bit because you had mentioned the Christ piece. One of the things just that I thought when I first kind of went down the track of realizing, like, oh, wait, so this Christ it can come alive in us. It's like, the laying down of the non-being, and then there's this risen being, this, the Christ-conscious self, the optimal self, if you will. And I had this thought for a time that, oh, then I'm done. And that's not true. And Beatitude 8 kind of helped me really settle into that. It's like, oh, wait, what 8 is really informing us of. And I love the way, again, J.M. brought up the word, this persecuted word, in a form that said, move out of your comfort zone. It's like this loving force, this power of these active forces of God are moving through us. And we're going to be moved away from our old habits. We're going to be moved out of our comfort zone. We're going to be moved out of those old habits so that we can get moved back into alignment with that pure self. And
you're going to function as a human being.
Yes. And so what I started to see is, and initially it didn't feel really as good as it did later because I was in resistance, that great resistor, right? But what happened for me is I would be confronted with these old habits, and there would be inspiration to do it differently. And it was moving through all that was in me. It was going back to Beatitude 1. Even though we're in Beatitude 8, it was going back to Beatitude 1 and 2 and 3 in that to allow for more refinement. And I saw old habits fall away. And there's so many examples that could be shared, but one that I've shared many times that's a real simple story is when I would feel a sense of overwhelm, in my day, I would find that inevitably I'd end up in the pantry. And in our pantry, we still had, crackers and chips and things, and I would end up eating, crackers and cheese and sausage or whatever it was. And then I would feel better, quote unquote better, and go back and attempt to work through whatever it was. So
right.
Over time, what began to happen in Beatitude 8 here, as I started to get to this more refined state, I would find myself moving to the pantry. And it's a walk-in pantry, so I'm standing in the pantry, and I had no action to pull anything off of the shelves. I was just standing there. I remember my wife one day saying, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm not quite sure, but I'm standing here." And what was really occurring is I was being confronted with a habit. And finally, after this happened, call it dozens of times, and each time I'd say, anything for me to be aware of. And that's one of my common phrases, anything for me to be aware of. And I'd just breathe. And sometimes there's this spark of insight. And one day it became really clear. It's like, hey, when I'm in a state of overwhelm, it's because I'm so accustomed to burying that sensation, I would use food and then try to get to a place where my system was calmer. So once that released, yes, it was my drug. Once that released, I was able to navigate overwhelm much better. And it still took a little bit of time, right? Because then it's like, wait, I'm feeling this. Now I'm aware of it. So it moves from the unconscious to now I'm conscious of it. Now what do I do instead of going to the pantry? And now what I've experienced is, in the today reference, if there's a sense that there's something overwhelming, then I go right to the breath. I allow for the emotions, and I allow for my perception to shift from where it is to open up to, well, what else is true? What's really optimal here? And I can stay present, and there's no movement toward, any drug, if you will.
Yeah, that's, when you put it in terms, think back to the intensive where we talked about a healing crisis. And the healing crisis happens when, one, I'm doing more and more of the right things. Think about the time when you found yourself in the pantry. You're doing more and more of the right things. And just before that happens, you hit a new level of vitality. When that occurs, then something that needs to be processed out of the system that's based in usually some form of hostility or fear is going to surface. What the world teaches us to do when those healing opportunities surface is go anesthetize against them. Give me a fifth of scotch. Give me some caffeine. Give me some sugar. Give me some white flour. Give me something to devitalize myself and shut this new level of vitality down. I was talking to a physician the other day who had just been through what he was, and this guy's a pretty well-known healer in Florida, and we do a lot of processing, and he's been doing this work for about 25 years now, but he was telling me about how he'd just gone through these horrible symptoms and his sinuses and all this stuff was going on. Man, he was in this big disease process. It's like, wait a minute, John, take a breath. Hold on here. What I hear you describing is you've been doing more and more of the right things. Is that true? Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
sorry.
You took a new, he's actually a supplement manufacturer, and you created this new supplement, and the way his mind interpreted it was when he took this new supplement, all of a sudden he said, well, that bottle that I had must have been old and had a bunch of bacteria in it, because as soon as I put it into my sinuses, my sinus just went crazy, and man, I've been sick for 3 days. It's like, wait a minute. No, you haven't been sick at all. And no, you didn't take on a bunch of bacteria. You've been doing more and more of the right things, right, John? Oh, yeah, definitely. You hit a new level of vitality. Man, the day before, he said, I was flying high. I felt so good. It was just, okay, so now that you've hit a new level of vitality, your system's able to dig into the next layer of what you need to process through, and you went into a physiological detox with your sinuses, which, remember, that's been one of the places where your symptoms have showed up all the way back from when you were a little kid. Oh, yeah, I never thought of that. So you didn't take in bacteria. You hit a new level of vitality, and here you are with what you need to process through. And the culture teaches us to drug ourselves when that happens, and that's a signal that says, oh, I need to keep doing more of the right things rather than head to the pantry. And allow my healing process to occur.
So good. So good. And the shift happens when, instead of someone saying, and he gave a great example of resistance, like, oh, I don't want this, like this is worse, right? But someone who's more conscious in Beatitude 8 is going to say, oh, wait, something's different, and what did I do different? And so there's like almost the maturing of that is to embrace it. Like, okay, it doesn't. And I'll use an example of a friend of mine who bought some nanosoma. I met him. He's down in Texas, and he and his wife started using it. And nanosoma is this wonderful product that you're familiar with. You might have talked about it on the program. But essentially, he started to feel tenderness in his head. And he's like, well, that's interesting. Now, he's aware of the healing process. He's a chiropractor. And it healed up after, a couple of days or whatever, and then another soft, tender spot. And he started to connect. He's like, wait a minute. And he had 6 concussions in his life. And as he kept taking the nanosoma, it went from one spot to another spot, and one of them was actually, he was hit in the eye as a 6-year-old, and his eye finally felt really tender, and then that healed up. And then after the physical stuff healed up, he started to open up to more of the emotional traps that had been there, and that started to open up. So he called and he's like, Mark, I just want to tell you, like, how great this is, because he's like, I didn't know this was there. But he had the eyes to see that he was actually moving forward, even though something that temporarily, showed up as, something uncomfortable was appearing in his head. Exactly. And that's the idea. Allow yourself to be moved out of your comfort zone. Allow yourself to be, it's like that's part of the process of becoming.
Continue to do the behavior, the quote-unquote right things to keep you moving in that direction. A lot of times when that healing crisis happened, and that's why it's been called a crisis, that's when people turn back to their old habits. There are 4 things that we talk about, 4 questions to ask yourself when you become symptomatic, whether your symptoms are a disease process or a healing process. The first question is, have I been doing more and more of the right things? Second question is, had I hit a new level of vitality? Well, then up come the symptoms. I'm symptomatic. There must be something wrong with me. Well, no. Ask yourself the third question. What's happening with your elimination? In a disease process, there's a restriction of elimination. In a healing process, there's an increase in elimination. And then the fourth one is, and this is especially important for people who've been involved in addiction healing, and that is that there will be a craving of the drug that was used when the initial offense occurred. Best example I've got of that is with a young woman who actually started doing this work back 40 years ago. She met me at a workshop in Michigan, and she's a naturopath, or she's actually written several books on nutritional healing, and it's was kind of a purist when it came to food. And she sort of abandoned this work and then came back around to it almost 40 years later. She actually was on the radio show quite often during the period of about a year when she was digging back into her forgiveness work. And she called me one day and she said, Michael, I don't know what's going on. I can't control myself. Now, in the naturopathic world, you know, there's an understanding that, like, for instance, if you've got a body that's, you know, a pound or two and you want to build it to a 1,000-pound body within a year, cow's milk is a really good thing. If you've got a body that is, you know, a pound or two in utero, and by the time it's 4, you want to have a body that's about 30 to 35 pounds, you probably need mother's milk, not cow's milk. And so in the naturopathic field, we oftentimes, in order to help people to create a repulsion from the stuff that maybe people are addicted to, we call it cow pus. And so, you know, this woman for decades has never eaten ice cream, but she's doing worksheets, and she calls me and she says, oh, Michael, I don't know what's going on. I can't help myself. She said, I'm just eating ice cream by the gallon. I'm just sucking it down, and I haven't touched ice cream in decades. What's going on? I said, well, what are you doing? What's well, I've been working on stuff with my dad, and, you know, the abuse. Her father was from the Middle East and was, you know, she was treated as a female, oftentimes as Middle Eastern men treat women, and she was working through a lot of that abuse. And so she shared that and said, well, you know, when Dad had abused you and afterward was feeling bad, what did he do? Oh, my God.
Oh, my goodness.
He takes me out for ice cream.
Oh, my goodness.
So as a kid, every time, you know, Dad abused her, his way of making up was to fill her with ice cream. So here she is, you know, 45 years later, and she's working through this abuse with Dad and going back to her old drug, the sugar, and the there's actually an opiate in cow's milk that addicts people to milk. Casomorphine, it's called. And the protein molecule it ties in with morphine. It's literally an addictive substance. And that was her, like, we talked afterwards. That was her last mouthful of ice cream. She had no attraction to it whatsoever. But the fourth thing that'll tell you when you're symptomatic, when you're in this state, is there's this attraction to, or this craving for. And my take is because when we take an addictive substance in, the energy signature, if not the actual molecules, are locked away with the energy that we dissociate from, that we stuff down, that we hold the breath around and lock out of view. And literally, when the healing process occurs, we become vital enough to rise above that and process it out. And then those energetic signatures are going to start to move back out of the system, and you can't think of anything else but that. And if you're not conscious of and aware, we've all heard about the guy that, he got his 30-year chip just last week. He hasn't had a drink in 30 years after, a couple of decades of being a drunk. And after 30 years, he falls off the wagon. What happened? Well, he got his 30-year chip, all kinds of excitement and aliveness, new level of vitality. And so what occurs when he's got all that support and that new level of vitality, up comes that craving for that alcohol. And if he doesn't know that it's his body detoxing that old energy signature, then there can be falling back into the addiction. And so each time you move through a layer. Go ahead.
I was going to say, in the beauty, you're probably going to say the same thing, so I apologize. It's like the people who do that, whether it's the ice cream or the alcohol, what this Beatitude is essentially saying is, as those habits fall away, the kingdom of heaven is yours. It's like you're gonna have this true relationship with that divine mystery that's available to all of us, and there's another level of insight or movement forward in your life toward what's optimal for you. As you talked about with Tuvayun, the whole point is like these are all moving you into your optimal life, your happiness and well-being, etc.
You're going to function as you were designed to function, as the offspring of love, because you are love, period. But that's not something that, is very welcome in the crab bucket, generally speaking.
No, and I'll go to the crab bucket next with Beatitude 9, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go for it.
So my doesn't mean it's right? I'm not claiming to be the master expert on this, but my understanding that helped me navigate these Beatitudes was to see, for me, that Beatitude 8 had a lot to do with my inner, and Beatitude 9 had to do with how people respond to my inner change and some of the things I put out there. So that blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake, is how it reads in the King James kind of stuff. But what I look at this one is like, hey, when we bring out, in Beatitude 7, when we bring things out that are going to support other people in finding their path, no matter how that looks. I mean, you could be, building tires and do that. You could do lots of different ways wherever you are in your life and what you're inspired to do. But if you're coming from that and then you're going through this further purification in Beatitude 9 or 8, Beatitude 9 is going to essentially reflect to anyone on this path that, hey, not everyone's going to like it, like you said before. They're going to project potentially on you and attack and even separate from you, because
they might even give you some kind of crazy diagnosis.
Yeah, they might do
some kind of crazy diagnosis and want to put you away in an asylum.
Right, and
you're
the key is,
being.
can we maintain our presence of being while that's happening? And so just a real quick lived experience, and I'll let you kind of close up on this one. Going back just to the simple example of the pantry. When my wife walked by and said, "What are you doing?" Right? And she didn't say, "Oh, hey, sweetie, you look really nice today." It's, with a big smile on her face. "What you doing?" It was more like, "What are you doing?" With kind of the look of,
"What's wrong with you?
You look really weird. What's wrong?" And for me to be present, say, "Yeah, I don't really know, but I'm in the pantry. I'm here." That would be someone in that particular moment who is able to stay present. But if I had responded differently and said, "Oh, yeah, nothing, I was getting some crackers," and I pull the crackers and go back into the evidential mind to try to, look normal, which was one of my big things too. Interesting contrast, right? Then that would be okay, there's some unripeness there in me, but everyone's going to face this. Anyone on this path, you're going to face this, and one of the things I've learned to do is celebrate it. And
Absolutely.
I've learned to recognize when someone's attacking, that's off energy, I understand that. So can I stay present and then start to, from that place, invite the active forces of God to come through in the words and the thoughts and the breath and in everything, just to know right action at that moment.
And of course, when my perceptual mind constructs an attack from the outside, it's because what I'm now getting the opportunity to process through and heal is all the ways I have attacked myself. I'm projecting that into my brain's image of what they say or do, and, they can say or do what they say or do. I'm only going to interpret as attack as if that resonates the ways in me that I have attacked myself. And it's my opportunity to refine the next level of what goes on inside of me and remove those energetic patterns and live in, now that I'm all the way through the Beatitudes, that latent neural structure the Creator's put in me to guide me to happiness and well-being can come into full blossom, full expression, because I've given up everything that shuts it down. And the last thing to go is going to be that attack stuff. So that someone could stand there and do what the world calls attack, and I'll look and go, that's interesting. because there's no attack left in me. I've processed through it all. I just stand as the offspring of the Creator, the expression of love, and go, do you need some support? You look like you're really in pain. I'm listening to your voice, and it sounds like there's some stuff going on for you. How can I support you? Rather than, look what you're doing to me. And that's a big one to give up. Like, that's a major piece of work. I'm talking from personal experience. That's a major piece of work to do.
It is. It's one of the hardest ones for me was and I'm not through, again, I'm a work in progress. I use these every day.
We all are, Mark.
And so one of the things that Beatitude 10, really highlights is you're going to keep doing this. It's like rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you, which is in some of the studying I've done. It's like, okay, we're in good company. So anyone who's ever gone through this path of awakening has done these things. They may not have had them written down the way we have them written down, but this is the process of healing. And Jesus gave it to us. Yeshua gave it to us. It's like this, one of the greatest gifts given to humanity is right here in these little practices, which we can find in all of the tools you teach. You can find the Beatitudes in them. I mean, these things are really, really beautiful. And what it's saying is, continue doing this until the last vestiges of fear have been healed. Until you're, like you said in the previous thing, until you can be fully human, always. But if something happens to throw off that game, if you will, you got some tools, right, to pull into practice and move back into that human state, the being state.
And the greatest addiction of these, we could put it into that, kind of scriptural language. What is the greatest addiction of all? When Yeshua talks about the first and the second and the greatest commandment, what's the greatest addiction? What's the last one that everybody gives up if they're going to actually do the work and give it up? It's hostility. In fact, it's such a common addiction that we call hostility an emotion. Hostility is not an emotion. Hostility is an anesthetic. It's no different than alcohol. It's a drug. It's a way, when pain is resonated in us, to anesthetize against feeling that pain. And if I anesthetize against feeling it, I can't work through it. I can't heal it. And so each time that hostility is aroused, to stop focusing on, the pointer to the outer world, look at you that's making me so mad, and stop going, here I am. Where is this tightness that locks me into this hostility and has me believe this whole perceptual construct about myself that's false? And to give up that anesthetic, that drug, is what empowers us to go to the last piece of work that needs to be done and reclaim the truth of who we are as human beings.
Well said.
Breathing with you and with our whole audience, and we're down to the last minute. So, Mark, I'm going to just say thank you for participating in this discussion the last few days, and it's a delight to get to interplay with you and capture your experience and bring it into this whole Beatitude practice. And
it's
everybody,
such a pleasure. Thank you.
Delighted. Thank you. And everybody have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. The world needs it. You can give it.